let's talk to Hank, pronouns he and him, who is a deist, who wants to talk about 5 scientific evidences for God. Hank, you are on AXP with Forrest and John. How you doing today?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good. I'm excited for these 5 scientific evidences for God because I've heard a lot of different ones, and so I'm hoping that you can break the trend of them all being bullshit. So I'm ready for it.
John, are you an actual engineer? I'm just curious.
I really hate that question because it automatically assumes that I'm just lying to people. That's an uncharitable way to interpret it. But yes, I'm an actual engineer. I have 2 engineering degrees. They're right on my bookshelf behind me. So, yeah.
Well, I apologize. I didn't mean to offend you.
I know. Like I said, that was a very.
So I was just curious.
No, that's perfectly fine. I know that you didn't mean it like that. It just comes across that way to me sometimes. I didn't mean to say that you were being that way, but yeah. Anyways.
I get it. I get asked if I'm a real biologist all the time, and funny enough, the line, the goalpost for being a real biologist is always one step further than anything I tell them I've done. It doesn't matter what it is. You don't have a degree? Yes, I do. I have several. Well, you've never worked in this area? Yes, I have actually. Well, you don't have a good advanced degree? Got 2 of them actually. Well, you don't. It's yeah, I get it. It's just the nature of being on the internet. Anyway, Hank, talk to me, man. What's going on with these scientific evidences? Let's start with the first one and go from there.
Okay, I had to tell the screener something. These are evidences that I think point toward a God for me. And you may well disagree that they're scientific or whatever, but my idea of a God
do you interpret them as scientific, or are they just things that are compelling to you?
I think they point towards scientific evidence.
Okay.
You certainly can't prove there's a God. I understand that. But I think they point toward, and I think they're different than anything you've ever heard before.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I will be approaching it from a scientific lens. It's my job, but I'm not going to hold you to the adjective of scientific too hard. We'll explore what you have to say for a minute.
Sure, I'm interested in y'all's opinion of what I think about this. But my idea about a God is some being that doesn't interfere with the development of the universe. He set it up, and then it's just letting it go. But he does guide it toward having an overall plan that has developed into humans, and that humans are getting better all the time. So with that explanation, I'll start out and say, number one, the research that I've seen about near-death experiences indicates that the experiences are usually pleasant. If that's true, which is all I've been able to find out, there must be something that's that's moving that in the direction of being pleasant. And I'm glad you're on, Forrest, because I think it's pretty obvious that it would not be evolution that's doing this. It's something beyond what we're looking at, since it's not random, that is biasing this toward being a pleasant experience, which I think points towards something that is doing this.
So if let me ask a question. In these NDEs, how are you sure that these experiences are happening during brain death and not on either side of the brain coming back, like oxygen being restored, so oxygen and circulation being restored to the brain? How do you know that it's happening in that time of brain death?
I would not know that, John. I just have to take people at their word. And like I said, the research that I've read about online talks about this, and sometimes they seem to do things that you look at and say, that's not possible that they could have known this, like being above their body and seeing things.
But you see, that's a thought-stopping technique. Sorry, Hank. That's a thought-stopping technique to sit there and be like, "Oh, there's no way they could have known this." That's classic thought-stopping like rhetoric there, because my brain does not stop. Maybe it's because of I've got ADHD or whatever, but my brain does not stop whenever you tell me something like that, because it's like you're telling me that these people knew things that they could have never known. So you're telling me that there's no way that your brain could subconsciously pick up on different things that are talked about between the doctors, or maybe things that your brain sensed that you weren't conscious that your brain picked up on. I mean, subliminal messaging and all of that is used regularly in in advertising and everything. So your brain picks up on a whole lot more information than you're consciously aware of. And when you tell me, oh, it's impossible for them to know this, I automatically doubt that, and I call bullshit on it, because of the fact that we know brains are complicated, because of the fact that we know that we can't pin down when these experiences are happening. And as far as we can tell, when the brain starts to die and it loses oxygen and all that, like people start, the brain goes into like these death throes, and it tries to, it does different things. And like one of those things is these experiences. And so like you're going to need to be able to understand and be able to point with evidence at the idea that this is happening during the time of brain death and no time afterwards. Ooh. Did you happen to read, and I don't know if Forrest might know the study that was done on this, but they actually did do a study on NDEs where they placed a piece of paper with something written on it above the lights in the room, where if there was an NDE and a person that like died on the table for a while and rose out of their bodies and whatnot, they would be able to see this paper, and nobody ever in the study that they looked at was able to accurately describe what was on the paper. So like, I guess all of the evidence actually points away from NDEs and not towards NDEs. And I'm kind of curious as to what you have been reading that has convinced you that NDEs are accurate.
Well, I guess I would like to go back to the point I was making was not about the NDEs, but that whatever these experiences are, my research looks like they're saying that they were usually almost always pleasant. And right. Why would they be pleasant? That was the point I was trying to make.
I would imagine, if I had to hazard a guess, I haven't done any serious studying on NDEs. I'm looking them up right now just to see, because there is actual research. And here I found this paper, which is literally just what happens in the brain when we die, deciphering the neurophysiology in the final moments of life, by Schlobin et al. From 2023 in Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience. And I've kind of been just skimming through it to see if there's like a predictable pattern in which things shut down in the brain. I haven't found anything. Like I said, I'm literally just scanning this for the first time as we're talking here. But like, if I had to hazard a guess, I would bet money that the brain evolved from the inside out. So the very, very center part of the brain down to the brain stem and everything like that. Those are the parts that are really responsible for like controlling your vital functions. And then you go a little bit further from there and you get like the thinky parts. And then the outermost, the cerebral cortex, the very outer parts, those are especially like this frontal area here is parts where you actually do like critical thinking, executive function, decision making, all these things where you're actually considering life. And so if I had to hazard a guess about this stuff, I would say that almost certainly your brain's going to shut down from the outside in as well. I have some good reason to say that, but again, this is not my area of expertise. I want to be very sure that I'm not speaking, too far out of my area, but like, I know for sure that like when I once passed out from blood loss, I lost my hearing first, then I lost my vision, and my heart kept beating, which would tell me that like my temporal lobes, this superior temporal lobe was shutting down, my occipital lobe was shutting down, my frontal lobe was shutting down, I was losing consciousness. But at the end of the day, my midbrain was still working, my brainstem was still working, my reticular formation was still working, like all the parts of the brain that keep me alive and do stuff are still working.
Anything we can do to ask.
Sorry? Hold on a second. Anything I could do to ask? I got a weird.
Sorry, I was typing it. I forgot to mute myself when I was typing.
That's
so
okay.
It's my fault.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm assuming that's what the something was saying. Somebody was saying something to me. But yes, if I had to hazard a guess about all this, that would be my explanation for that. You get a pleasant experience because the part of your brain that's real good at producing anxiety and thinking so hard about things is shutting down. Your dreams tend to be, generally pleasantish experiences, and that's not entirely the same thing at all. But like, if you're losing consciousness, if you're drifting away from reality, makes sense that it would be a relatively, relaxing thing, if not a happy, excitable thing, but like chill. It'd be a chill thing. So I don't know, man. That's kind of where I'm at with it. Even if I didn't know that, though, even if I didn't have any good reason to say any of that, the idea that like slipping out of consciousness being not scary, not necessarily frightening, that would just kind of follow logical sense to me, to say like I'm not holding on to the fear of death anymore because I'm drifting out of the part of my mind that is concerned with that sort of thing. That's my whole thing.
Okay, sounds reasonable. Okay, number two, when I think about my life, my consciousness, and the fact that really all of us here our consciousness has been placed in a body during a time when there's modern medicine and all the other advantages that exist today. I think about what's the probability that I happen to be, and that everybody today, at least in America to a large extent, is in such a really good time. And I think that probability is pretty small. If you want to say, is it possible that your consciousness is put into bodies all through time, so that you have experienced this many times before? It kind of answers a lot of questions about justice, which doesn't necessarily have to be true. But if that was the case, something is doing something with these individual consciousness that is placing it from one time period to another. I know that sounds like reincarnation, but it just seems, I was just looking at the probabilities. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Not really. It sounds like you're saying that like we're born with our consciousness in our body and we get to experience things. We agree on that. And it sounds like the evidence for a God here is that our experiences are pretty good right now. Times are good. Things are going well. And I don't get the connection there, because like they're not going well for everybody. Well, they could be a whole hell of a lot better. And what does that say about, the millennia before us where things were going worse than now? So like, I don't get it. Maybe I'm missing something.
Okay. Maybe if I said, why wasn't my consciousness put in a body 200 years ago when things would have been much rougher for me?
Oh. So
why did I get this?
Your consciousness is an emergent property of your brain. So like this particular arrangement of neurons hadn't happened yet, I suppose. And also experiences, because it's not all just, brain states. It's also, your life experiences around you that shape and mold your personality and blah, blah, blah. Like you're a unique little snowflake, and you hadn't been born yet. And so like, again, if that is the case, even if I didn't have an answer for like where our consciousness comes from or where personalities come from, anything like that, what about the people who were born a little bit ago during slavery? Was that evidence that God wasn't real then, that they were born into such a horrible situation? What about the people who are born right now in parts of the world or even parts of this country where they're subjected to horrible atrocities. There's wars going on right now. There's a genocide going on right now. We have a prison industrial complex right now. Like, we've got a lot of bad shit going on in the world. So what about the people born in those bodies that are experiencing those bad times? Is that evidence against a God? Whereas your good experience is evidence for a God? I don't know, man. That one doesn't really hold up with me.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm talking about, Forrest, is that if they were born in multiple experiences, that would explain why you're sometimes in a good place and sometimes in a bad place.
Well, so if I can ask, how is this scientific evidence for God? Maybe I lost that in the beginning explanation, because I thought we were supposed to be talking about scientific evidence for God, right? So how does this prove that God exists?
If our consciousness is in multiple bodies over time, somebody is or something is putting that consciousness in different bodies.
Okay, what's your proof that our consciousness is something that's not an emergent property of our brain, and that can be transported across time and space to different brains and different bodies? Like, where's your evidence that this can even actually happen?
John, I'm not trying to present any proof because I know I can't. I was just looking at the probabilities of me just having this great experience compared to the probability of it happening multiple times, and this just happens.
So hold on, Hank. I don't understand the point of this particular point in your 5 scientific evidences that prove God. Like, if it's not meant to be some kind of evidence that persuades you in the direction of God, then why is it in the list? Like, why are we discussing this? Like, it just seems weird. I ask you for evidence, and you say, "Oh, this isn't meant to prove God," but yet we asked you, like, how does this prove God? And you're trying to answer it, but it's apparently not supposed to prove God. I'm thoroughly confused. I don't know, Forrest, do you understand?
It sounds more like what Hank is saying is that, like, things are going real, and maybe again, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not trying to straw man you here. It sounds like what you're saying is that times are really good for you personally, and that seems unlikely considering how shitty times have been for everybody else in history, including today. So God. And I can't wrap my head around that.
Okay. I'll try one more time and then I'll drop it, okay? Times are really good for me right now. But if my consciousness has been in multiple bodies across time, then
it hasn't.
This is just one of those times that are good for me.
Right, but it hasn't. It hasn't been in multiple bodies across time. We have no reason to say that that's true.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. What evidence is there that our consciousness has been in multiple bodies across time? Like, you're spouting that, you're just throwing that out there in the clouds. Like, you're just picking it at, like, it just seems like a random thought that you're picking out, of your thoughts there. Like, what if our consciousness was thrown into some kind of extraterrestrial that lives in a utopia? Like, that seems like that would be a much better situation than us living here on Earth amongst all of the unnecessary suffering and evil that we find ourselves in. Like, what does that mean? The fact that God, that this creator that you think that this points to, puts us here in this hellscape rather than in a utopia. Like, I don't know. It just seems like you're just randomly picking a topic out and saying, well, what if this?
Okay, guys, I concede. I give up. That
well, can you instead of giving up on it, can I just ask, like, why do you say that? Because, like, I know you said to John you can't prove it. So why do you say it? Why do you say that your consciousness has existed in lots of other bodies? What makes you believe that's true?
I'm saying that because I think the probability that I just happen to be put in this great time is very much less than the probability that I have been in different bodies multiple times across time. I'm just looking at probabilities. That's it.
Do you think, okay, so but I'm going to ignore most of that because it's a whole other scientific question, just to try to get to your point. Do you think the times now are better than they were, so let's say 200 or 300 years ago?
I think mankind has improved, and I definitely think the time for me right now would be better than if I had been born 200 years ago.
Okay, I can agree to that. I feel the same way. Do you think that things are going to continue to get better, though? Like as science continues to progress and technology continues to progress, do you think that 300 years from now, life might be even better than it is at this moment?
I think the probability is very good that it will be better, although I realize that things get better and then sometimes they'll get worse, sometimes they'll get better, but on a long scale time, we're headed upward. We're doing better.
I can agree to that more or less. Yeah, sure, there's special circumstances, and yes, things do fluctuate, but overall, I agree. I think things are getting better. So if you're saying that it's so spectacularly unlikely that you were born in this time when things are so good, then why don't you think it would be more evidence for this God? It would be more spectacular if you were born 500 years from now when things are really good. And if you were born then you'd be looking back at today in 2025 and saying, oof, man, I could have been born back then when they still didn't have a cure for cancer yet. And you still had to pay an arm and a leg for basic health care. And where trans people weren't, equally represented. And that's, to me, it sounds like your argument only works if time stops tomorrow. And this is the best it's ever going to get.
No, I'm saying maybe I will be born again 500 years from now.
Do you? But what we're trying to get across is that there's no good reason to think that happens. We have no evidence whatsoever of a brain or of a mind existing outside of a body, and we have no evidence whatsoever of someone's consciousness being transplanted into somebody else or being born again. We don't have any reason to think any of that. You said some stuff about probability. I don't think it's reasonable. But at the end of the day, even if that is what happened, that doesn't mean that there's a God doing it. That just means that that's a thing that happens. That doesn't necessitate any kind of arbiter for that sort of thing. It sounds to me like you've made a lot of assumptions here, and I don't understand why.
As I said, I was just, in my mind, that looks like evidence, not proof, certainly not proof, that something is controlling, if that's the truth. And I know that there's no evidence for that. I agree with you 100%. But if that's,
let's try number 3.
Something is controlling.
Let's try number 3 then, because we're gonna disagree on that, but maybe number 3 will shed more light. So what's your third evidence for God? So far, we've been about 10 minutes on each one. Let's hear the next one. I don't think we're gonna get through all 5 at this rate, but I want to hear another one.
Well, if I'm taking up too much time, I understand.
It's okay. It's okay. You're doing great.
Okay. I'm going to give one. I'm going to say occasionally someone comes along, like I'm going to say like a George Fox or a Gandhi or Martin Luther King, who are willing to sacrifice their lives for the betterment of mankind. And since I've got you on the line, Forrest, I think you'll be able to understand what I'm saying, at least, that this appears to go against a normal response of self-preservation, which means to me that there could be a force in the universe that is slowly guiding mankind toward what I would consider a more godlike response that wasn't in line with natural responses. What about?
Okay, I have a lot of problems with that one.
Okay.
So
right.
Just to start with, you mentioned like Gandhi and Martin Luther King. They did give their lives for their cause, not on purpose. They were both assassinated. I guarantee neither one of them were excited about the situation. They were murdered by people. So like, that doesn't really track for me. However, not sticking just to those guys, there are other situations in which people have sacrificed their lives intentionally for the good of humanity as a whole. The first thing that came to mind was like the Chernobyl liquidators, you know what I mean? Like the people who knew that they were going to die, but soldiers, you know, whatever, who do these things knowing they're going to die, but it's for the betterment of their community. That does not go against nature, especially in a highly social species like ours. Duty and service, I totally just said duty, and service to your community, especially to family and those you perceive as family, is a highly motivating factor that actually is selectively like advantageous. When we talk about evolution, we can actually dig into that. There's direct fitness, which is your reproduction and your offspring's reproduction. And then there's indirect fitness, which is talking about your family members. Like I would gladly give my life for 2 brothers or 8 cousins kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like that if you're helping your family members reproduce, that's still a fitness benefit to the species overall. And so there's still a thing there. Altogether, we call that inclusive fitness. It's a whole bonanza of weird terms, but there's still what I'm trying to get across is that there is a naturalistic explanation for this. And even if there wasn't, I don't think that leads to godly behavior, considering the fact that like there's none of that in the God that you worship in terms of like this self-sacrificing behavior. We don't see that in your God.
Okay, one point I would like to ask you about, what about the, I guess it's a fact, that people in general, the public, looks at people like that, like Gandhi and Martin Luther King, and there's something in them that says, this is a godlike characteristic, whatever you want to call God, or sacrificial type. Which wouldn't happen with, say, you know, the people that flew planes into the World Trade Center. But they look at these people,
absolutely would,
and they are willing to follow them and say, you know, this is godlike, and I want to follow them.
I want to push back on that. Absolutely, that is the same exact thing. So Martin Luther King and Gandhi worshipped different gods and had vastly different religions, and did what they did for the betterment of their communities and their people who are being oppressed. And they used religion sometimes as a motivator, but not all the time. And as far as, you know, the terrorists who flew planes into buildings, like, I hate to break it to you, Hank, but they were devoutly religious, and they were doing that for their God as well. And they were doing that because they believed that was godly behavior. They were extremely like, it's funny because like, if we had their morality, if we believed in their doctrine, they would be incredibly moral people because they were so devoted to their morality that they were willing to sacrifice their lives for it, like you were trying to attribute to Gandhi and MLK a minute ago. These are people who are so devoted to their godly beliefs that they did atrocious things. And we see that in Christianity too. This is not exclusively a thing in Islam. There have been plenty of Christian terrorists and plenty of Christian martyrs and plenty of Christian, people who went out there and committed heinous atrocities in the name of their God because they believed it was godly behavior. Lest we forget that that slavery was headed up by Christians in this country, that the Confederacy was the Articles of Secession from Texas specifically says we are leaving the United States to preserve slavery because that is what the Christian God tells us to do, and any Christian nation should do the same. The KKK is a Christian organization. The Lord's Resistance Army is a Christian organization. Plenty of Christian terrorists and plenty of Christian sons of bitches out there. So like at the end of the day, you're describing the lengths to which fundamentalism can drive somebody. And it can drive somebody to very good extremes, or it can drive somebody to very bad extremes. But at the end of the day, the warning is that it can drive you to extremes. Humanism, atheism, secularism, belief in the virtue of humanity for humanity's sakes, those things can also lead you to an extreme, but only in a good direction. We have yet to see an atheist terrorist who is out there hurting people because they're just so atheist and they want to prove atheism. That hasn't happened yet, as far as I know. But we've seen plenty of people bombing people, destroying hospitals, flying planes and buildings to prove their religion. We've seen that quite a bit.
Again, I agree with you 100%, but I wasn't talking about Gandhi and Martin Luther King. I was talking about other people that when they do things where they're self-sacrificing, other people look at it. What is it in other people that make them think this is a godly thing? Not the people themselves, but other people.
I don't understand why you go to godly thing. Like I like that. That sounds like a very subjective and human determined sort of classification for things. I mean, if you're just talking about self-sacrifice, I don't see how self-sacrifice is a godly thing. I mean, I just don't understand like why you would think that is a godly thing. What's your like? How do you define what a godly thing is?
John, you're right. I shouldn't have said godly. It's that people look at them and think this is the right thing to do. I'm willing to follow this person.
I think that's just
how is this supernatural? Sorry, Forrest, go ahead.
No. I'm saying the same thing as you. I think that just speaks to culture. I think that just speaks to the fact that to sacrifice yourself for something that you believe in, especially if that thing happens to be the benefit of all humanity, is an incredibly brave and selfless thing to do. And we all aspire to be so cool because we kind of have that culture of like it's better to help people around you. And if you see someone who's willing to kill themselves over how much they're willing to help people, that's great. I, as an atheist, can look to Gandhi and say, hey, a lot of what he did and spoke for and stood for was wonderful. And I aspire to be as great as he was someday. But I can also look at some of the shitty things that he said and some of the shitty things that he did and be like, I don't want to be that guy, though, you know? And so like that, all you're telling me is that, like, you know, we are challenged by people who exceed our expectations and exceed our limitations and do great things. And we're compelled by their incredible moral character and selflessness the same way that we are compelled by seeing a great athlete. And they, in their greatness, challenge us to go out and strive to be better, you know, or a great mathematician or scientist, and they compel us to go be smarter and to work harder. And like that, I think that's just the nature of humans as competitive little monkeys, man. That's just what we do. I don't know, John, do you have anything else you want to throw on there?
Well, yeah, I just, I really don't understand how, you know, self-sacrifice is in any way points towards, you know, a divine figure. Cause like, I could, you know, decide to sacrifice myself, you know, for the betterment of mankind or whatnot. And people could follow me, but that doesn't make me like God. It doesn't make me like any kind of divine figure. It just makes me somebody that, you know, sacrifice it. Like that's just a fact. I sacrifice myself or whatever. Maybe that it,
doesn't prop any. I was going to say it doesn't suppose that there's any divine thing either. Not just making you God, but it doesn't suppose that there's any divine thing like a God that made you do that. Because I think that's what Hank is hinting at.
Right. And I just don't think that necessarily entails anything about the supernatural or creator being or anything like that. Like, I just don't see the connection there. So that's where I'm getting lost.
Yeah. Hank, does that like answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. But you did bring up something that I've often wondered about. When you look at the rate of atheists that are in prison compared to the rate of other people, religious people that are in prison, you'll see that it's incredibly small. And I'm wondering why atheists don't make the argument that if everybody converted to atheism, we could pretty much eliminate prisons.
Oh, I can answer
doesn't make any
that.
sense is why. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, right.
I've been talking for a while.
Yeah, I mean, because breaking the law. Well, hold on, Hank. So breaking the law, being a shithead, or being evil to your fellow man or whatnot, that exists across the religious spectrum. So like religious, non-religious, it doesn't matter. Like, I mean, I don't think that becoming an atheist inherently makes you a better person, but I do think that, decoupling yourself from the very archaic ideas that religion convinces you to accept can potentially make you a better person. But I don't think that you're inherently a better person just because you don't believe in a God. It's a very nuanced thing, but definitely becoming an atheist or shedding religious ideals does not inherently make you a better person.
Yeah, I would say that the atheists are a smaller percentage of the population, so it would make sense that they would be a smaller percentage of the prison population as well. However, to your point, they are like disproportionately smaller. Like they are not even represented at the rate that you would expect with their small population size. But the main reason we wouldn't use that as an argument is that although atheists, would, I guess, have a better reason to be more humanistic and to not do heinous, shitty things, at the end of the day, correlation isn't causation. And I can understand why that's, it would be an illogical argument. And it wouldn't serve anybody any real good. I love the idea of eliminating prisons, but I don't think atheism is the way to do it. I think, a better society is the way to do it.
Okay. Well, I appreciate
with that,
guys. And
yeah. And I want to hear your last two things. I hope you call us again sometime and tell us.